Hello everyone, welcome to the 28th edition of our InfoGest Viva webinar. My name is Sara Perez and I would like to introduce my colleague Daniela Freitas, who will be conducting this webinar with me. This event is organized by the team of postdocs from Teagasc Research Center in Ireland, and the webinar series is aimed to share the latest findings in digestion with presentation from recently graduated PhDs, postdocs, and early career researchers. The presentation is pre-recorded video with the following question and answer session with the speaker. So I will invite you to use the question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. Our speaker today is Marina Eichhorn, with her project about impact of pectin characterization on Maillard conjugates, formation and dysfunctionality in dispersed systems. Marina conducted her PhD research in the Department of Food Technology and Food Material Science in Technische Universität of Berlin in collaboration with Symrise, supervised by Dr. Stephan Drusch. Her research expertise are in food technology, focusing on protein polysaccharide interactions, Maillard conjugation, plant protein functionality, encapsulation technologies, and in vitro of plant protein ingredients. Additionally, Marina has joined recently the Teagasc team and will be part of the hosting team in the next edition of the InfoGest webinar. So now let's hear from Marina.
Hello everyone. Thank you for a kind introduction, girls. Today I would like to speak with you about Maillard conjugation, especially about the impact of pectin characteristics on the conjugate formation and their functionality, especially in disparate systems. But why protein polysaccharide conjugation? In recent years, the food industry has been looking for ingredients that are not only functional but also sustainable and clean label. Plant proteins, particularly those derived from side streams, seem like the perfect match. They are renewable, acceptable by consumers, and fit for the sustainability concept. But in reality, they still face major challenges like poor solubility, limited emulsifying capacity, and sometimes off flavor. That's why we use Maillard reaction to conjugate protein with polysaccharide as a way to improve their functional and structural performance. Maillard conjugation is based on the initial stage of the Maillard reaction, where the free alpha or epsilon amino group of the protein, in our case potato protein, reacts with the free carbonyl group of a polysaccharide to a so-called glycosylamine. The modification of the epsilon amino group of the protein leads to a reduction in positive charges, resulting in a shift of the isoelectric point toward lower pH values. In addition, polysaccharide with ionizable carboxyl groups introduce these groups to the structure of the molecule, which further intensify this shift. At the same time, the polysaccharide chains, which are rich in polar hydroxyl groups, decrease the hydrophobicity of the protein by shielding nonpolar surface regions, and of course, as a result, solubility can increase across a broader pH range. At the same time, the enhanced amphiphilicity ultimately contributes to improved emulsifying capacity and greater emulsion stability. And to obtain conjugates with well-defined functional properties, the Maillard reaction must be limited to its initial stage. This prevents the formation of high molecular weight compounds such as melanoidins, which cause undesirable browning, as well as potentially harmful substances including acrylamide, heterocyclic amines, and advanced glycation end products. All of these compounds collectively compromise the functional quality of the final product. Speaking about polysaccharide as a conjugation partner, we used pectin, a high molecular weight anionic polysaccharide, which is well established in food applications. It is considered safe from a regulatory perspective. It is widely accepted by consumers, contributes dietary fiber with potential prebiotic benefits, and can be recovered from side streams such as juice production. Pectin has a very variable structure, and it makes pectin especially attractive for conjugation. It consists of a linear backbone of alpha-1,4 galacturonic acid units, which are interrupted by a 1,2 ramenose residue that carry a neutral sugar side chain. The C6 position of a galacturonic acid may be methoxylated, defining low and high methoxylated pectin. This atom can be also amidated, so converted into amide group through amidation. The amount and distribution of these functional groups determine the proportion of free carboxyl groups, influencing both the molecular charge and charge density, and this in turn enables electrostatic as well as steric stabilization mechanism for further application, for example, in emulsions. So this is where my dissertation comes in. My aim was to gain a deeper understanding of the following questions. First, how do the molecular properties of pectin influence conjugate formation when applying a novel production method of vacuum drying? Second, how do these conjugates affect emulsion stabilization, and what specific role does the pectin component play in this process? And finally, taking a broader perspective, how do the conjugates behave under gastrointestinal condition, and what impact does this have on the protein's digestibility? Starting with the first question. Under typical conjugation pH conditions around pH 7, both protein and pectin are negatively charged, which can create electrostatic repulsion between the polymers. Using pectins with higher degree of substitution, such as higher methoxylation and/or amidation, reduces the overall negative charge of the pectin, allowing the biopolymers to approach more closely and increasing the likelihood of covalent bond formation. In our case, a higher degree of substitution resulted in a stronger color development and a slightly greater loss of free amino groups. Also, a higher degree of substitution resulted in a higher increase of molecular weight, especially between 34 and 43 kilodalton and in a range above 170 kilodalton. These conjugates showed a broad molecular weight distribution. This broad molecular weight distribution we could attribute to a side reaction, which is the thermodegradation of pectin during conjugation. This degradation occurs due to three different reactions, which is demethoxylation, depolymerization of the pectin backbone, and cleavage of neutral sugar side chains. The demethoxylation depends on the degree of methoxylation. The higher the DM, the stronger is the reaction due to more carboxyl groups in the molecule, and reaction rates decline as DM decreases. In our case, the decrease of the degree of methoxylation occurred the highest in case of high methoxylated pectin. The thermally induced degradation of the backbone of pectin occurs via beta elimination, which reduces the molecular weight. This is accompanied by side reaction, including cleavage of neutral sugar side chains. High methoxylated pectin is more susceptible because their methoxylated groups drive the beta elimination, and low methoxylated pectin are more heat resistant, especially the low methoxylated amidated pectin. And also here we could see with the 60% high methoxylated pectin was more susceptible to the thermodegradation. So if we conclude, a high degree of methoxylation promotes thermodegradation, whereas amidation reduces it. And this has a direct effect on the further application. The length of the pectin component, which is bound to our protein, influence later the steric stabilization of the oil droplets, for example. To characterize the functionality of our conjugates, we compared the emulsion stability and oil droplet size distribution of emulsion prepared with conjugates to emulsion prepared with protein, in our case potato protein. In addition, we zoomed in into the oil-water interface and analyzed the interfacial properties of our polymers. For potato protein, we see that oil droplet size increases as the pH rises. The darker color represents the higher pH values in this diagram. At the isoelectric point between pH 6 and 8, which is dark gray and black, the distribution becomes bimodal, and electrostatic repulsion between the oil droplet size at this pH range is nearly lost, which leads to aggregation of the oil droplet size and destabilization of the emulsion. So the emulsion prepared at the pH 8 showed a phase separation, which even was more pronounced over time. Comparing it to the emulsion with conjugates, we could see the vice versa effect. The conjugation induces the shift of the isoelectric point towards more acidic values, which improves functionality at higher pH values. Again, the darker color represents the higher pH values, and the emulsion oil droplet size is at these pH values is much smaller than at pH 2. Comparing two conjugates with each other, so conjugate with low methoxylated pectin in blue and conjugate with amidated pectin in orange, we could see that conjugates with amidated pectin produce smaller droplets and more stable emulsion across a wide pH range. So the emulsions with conjugates prepared at the isoelectric point of the protein, so at higher pH, pH 8, were very stable in case of amidated pectin, so conjugates with amidated pectin, and were stable also over time. This we can attribute to the higher conjugation rate of these conjugates, resulting in less unbound protein, which can destabilize the emulsion, and a more pronounced steric and electrostatic stabilization due to less degraded pectin chain of the amidated pectin. Let's zoom in on the oil-water interface. In case of potato protein, we see amplitude sweeps at different pH values, pH 3 and pH 6, which represents here the isoelectric point. The difference between them is the height of the G' and G double prime. The values at pH 3 are lower than at pH 6, and the linear viscoelastic regime is longer than at pH 6. This can be attributed to a charge of the protein at the specific pH. At pH 3, well below the isoelectric point, the protein carry a high negative charge. This creates a strong electrostatic repulsion, preventing close association at the interface. The result is a loose, homogeneous, and highly flowable interfacial network with high cluster mobility, which makes it resistant to a shear for a longer period of time. At pH 6, close to the isoelectric point, electrostatic repulsion is greatly reduced. The protein pack is more tightly, forming a dense and elastic network with strong intermolecular interactions. However, this also increases the risk of aggregation, leading to an inhomogeneous interface that is more sensitive to shear stress. Conjugates, the overall behavior is similar to the protein, but the pectin component controls the density and thickness of the additional interfacial layer, leading to clear pH-dependent differences. At pH 3, pectin chains are protonated. The conjugates with low methoxylated pectin, which has shorter and partly degraded chains, form a compact, thin layer around the loose protein film. In case of conjugates with amidated pectin with long intact chains, this forms a looser, more entangled layer due to steric hindrance. And together with the mobile protein film, this creates a flexible, shear-resistant network. At pH 6, pectin chains are more dissociated and extended into the aqueous phase. No distant secondary layer can be formed around the dense protein film, but the mobility of the conjugate clusters still provides some shear resistance. So the stabilization mechanism, protein forms the primary interfacial film, and pectin provides a pH-dependent secondary layer. Near the isoelectric point, steric effects dominate, and at higher pH, steric hindrance and electrostatic repulsion act together. Only conjugates with long, intact pectin chains withstand mechanical stress, while degraded fragments promote bridging and reduce stability. And to examine the last questions, potato protein conjugated with different pectin types was tested for its in vitro digestibility. We were focusing on the overall digestibility. This was determined after completing the oral, gastric, and intestinal phases following the INFOGEST protocol based on total nitrogen quantification in digestible and indigestible fractions. Under the acidic condition of the stomach around pH 3 and the presence of calcium ions, we were expecting that the pectin component of protein pectin conjugates will form gel structures whose stability strongly depends on the pectin type. In case of low methoxylated pectin, these pectin gels, mainly through calcium-mediated egg box interactions, which can be weakened at lower pH because of reduced charge density, limits calcium binding sites. And amidated pectin, by contrast, can form more stable gels at these pH, as additional hydrogen bonds form via the amide groups. So we were expecting that these gel matrices can act as a physical barrier of varying effectiveness and can therefore modulate the enzymatic hydrolysis of the conjugated protein during gastric digestion. Let's look first at the behavior of non-conjugated potato protein. In the stomach, potato protein does not form gel, so we could not see any gel in our CLSM pictures, and is readily hydrolyzed by pepsin. However, once it reaches the small intestine, proteolysis becomes very limited because our potato protein contains natural protease inhibitors, including trypsin and chymotrypsin inhibitors. As a result, its overall digestibility is reduced, which was around 50%. Overall, the conjugate shows similarly low or even lower digestibility than non-conjugated potato protein. Under gastric conditions, both conjugates form gels, and enzyme diffusion is dictated by the gel structure. So in case of conjugates with low methoxylated pectin, we have inhomogeneous gel structures, and in case of conjugates with amidated pectin, we have more evenly distributed or evenly formed gel network. So the pectin dictates the gel structure. In case of conjugates with low methoxylated pectin, we have low calcium binding capacity at this pH. They do not form egg box structures, but instead show random cross-linking through calcium and hydrogen bonds. They have thermally degraded shorter chains and those fewer junction zones, creating pores in the gel larger than a pepsin molecule, and the protein fractions can located at the surface and easily attacked by the pepsin. In case of amidated pectin, they form stronger acid-induced gels. They have longer thermally stable chains, create more junction zones. They create additional hydrogen bonding between carboxyl and amide group, form a dense matrix. So we're expecting gels with smaller pores and pores smaller than pepsin molecule, limiting enzyme diffusion. And if we go going further to the intestinal phase, pH 7, the gel structure create a distinct starting point to further digestion. So pectin particles at pH 7 swell as they hydrate, accompanied by carboxyl dissociation and partial depolymerization. So we have a loss of interactions, so intermolecular interactions. And these effects are accompanied by the existing inhibitory effect, and due to conjugation we have also steric and electrostatic effects which slow down our enzyme hydrolysis. Yes, so the gel formation works as a barrier for the enzymes. So coming to the conclusion, first of all, conjugate formation and functionality. A high degree of substitution promotes conjugate formation, and amidated pectin shows greater thermal stability during vacuum drying. Conjugates made with amidated pectin deliver the best emulsion stabilization across a broad pH range, highlighting their strong potential as neutral food emulsifiers. In terms of digestibility, both the conjugation process and the pectin type influence how accessible the protein's cleavage sites are. Amidated pectin provides stronger protection against enzymatic hydrolysis, leading to reduced digestibility and enabling control or delayed nutritional release. Conversely, higher digestibility ensures an efficient supply of essential amino acids while still providing dietary fiber. And coming to an end, here we have next steps from different perspectives. First of all, from an ecological perspective, the use of pectin can be changed to a use of pectin-rich side streams, such as citrus fiber. This supports the holistic utilization of plant resources and helps reduce raw material costs. And from a techno-functional and nutritional perspective, it will be essential to evaluate the digestibility of these conjugates in real food systems. This includes understanding their behavior under physiological conditions and their impact on lipid release, assessing their performance as emulsifiers and neutral encapsulation system is equally important, as these could enable controlled release of bioactive compounds. And ultimately, nutrition bioavailability will depend on the concentration applied in the final product. And at the end, I would like to thank my supervisor, Professor Dr. Stephan Drusch, for the guidance and support throughout this work. My appreciation also goes to my collaboration partners at Symrise AG, especially Jenny Weissbrodt. Many thanks to the team at the Department of Food Technology and Food Material Science, as well as the former Department of Food Biosciences for their support. And I'm also grateful to all the students I had the opportunity to supervise who contributed directly to this project. And finally, I acknowledge the EU Horizon 2020 program and the UNCAP for Health project for enabling my research stay at Anna Biotechnologies and Teagasc in Ireland, which significantly strengthened the digestion-related part of this work. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Marina, for this presentation. It's a very nice presentation with very clear slides, very clear explanations. So maybe to start, I would like to ask you if you could explain the novel method that you used to produce the Maillard conjugates and outline the main advantages of the approach that you decided to use.
Sure. Thank you so much for this question. Maybe I can start with explaining the conventional method of producing the conjugation. And this method is a batch process. It takes a lot of time. So for the conjugation, we need to prepare a solution, of course, between protein and pectins in my case. Then you have to freeze dry this solution, so we have a kind of powder. And then to induce the Maillard reaction, we need to put this powder into an incubator at specific humidity and temperature. And it takes around a couple of hours or weeks, depending on the degree of glycosylation you would like to have at the end. So it takes weeks to produce conjugates. And this is, of course, not efficient at all. And having this in mind, we tried to give a new run for a new methodology, and we used vacuum drying. So in case of vacuum drying, we are preparing the solution, we drying the solution and inducing Maillard reaction at the same time. So in our case, we did a huge preliminary study on parameters, and in our case, we could produce conjugates with a increased functionality around in 3 hours at a specific temperature. So we shorten these production method to 3 hours, which is, of course, if we are thinking about the economical perspective, a very nice, efficient method at the end. And vacuum drying, you can also do not only in a batch process, you can do it also continuously with a vacuum belt dryer. So yeah, this was a huge approach we did in this area.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's a very big it's a huge advantage that in terms of time and cost cuts that you can achieve with this optimization of optimized approach. Can I just ask, did you also assess the functional properties of the conjugates prepared with high methoxylated pectin?
Yes, indeed. So in the presentation, I just showed two types of conjugates, so with low methoxylated and amidated pectin. And yes, we, of course, we tried also to do the functionality of the conjugates with high methoxylated pectin. I didn't show the results here in this presentation. So they were behaving the same as conjugates with low methoxylated pectin. So the difference was very small. So we decided not to take these results into this, or I decided not to take these results into this presentation. And the reason is, as I mentioned previously in the part of the formation, of the conjugate formation, the high methoxylated pectin is very prone to thermal degradation. So it's susceptible to thermal degradation. At the end, we have a shorter chain of the pectin, which is covalently bound to our protein. And this could be a reason why it's kind of behaving the same as a low methoxylated pectin. So it has less charge, it has less or shorter chains, and that's why it can didn't improve the functionality as we wanted, because the sterical stabilization and electrostatical stabilization are kind of reduced at the end. Yeah, this was the reason. But yes, we did analyze all the conjugates we produce.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe just as a final question, or I saw you did static digestions on your during your research, and I was wondering if maybe you think it would be interesting to do semi-dynamic digestions as well, if maybe that could be that could give you maybe a different perspective in terms of the results you would obtain. Or do you think that could be interesting as well to do?
So I'm not that familiar with semi-dynamic digestion, but I guess it could be very interesting. As I remember it's correctly, you're always stirring during this digestion. So it could be interesting to analyze the impact on the gastric on the gastric phase, because what I was seeing in the static digestion was this gelation during gastric. Once I was adding the acid, my solution was gelling like directly, so I couldn't mix properly. And then I was also thinking, if I'm stirring in meanwhile, can I kind of disturb this gelation? But then of course, if I'm not gelling or disturbing the gelation during this gastric phase, which effect does it has at the end on the digestibility of the proteins? Because now we have a kind of very nice result. So one conjugate can like this gelation during the gastric phase can kind of affect the efficiency of the mixing with the enzyme, so we can less digest or more digest depending on the conjugate. And of course, it could be very interesting to see the impact of the static digestion. And I guess static digestion kind of mimic maybe the human digestion more, like in a better way, if I know it directly. Yeah, it could be a nice approach, but I guess it takes also a long of time to proceed this type of experiment.
That's true as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Marina. Thank you very much for presenting your work and for the excellent presentation. I'm going to hand over to Sarah now. I don't know if you have any more questions, or if you would like to maybe introduce the next webinars.
I will share some slides. Thank you so much, Marina, for
Thank you.
the presentation, and thank you, Daniela, for co-presenting the webinar with me. Well, I would like to mention that we will have a break for next month for the Christmas holidays, so we will be back for the session of February with Rebecca's presentation. I also wanted to mention about the food digestion webinar, which will open the submission for the abstracts, and the deadline for sending them is on 21st of January 2026. So the abstracts are welcome for joining the next conference. Thank you so much all for attending, and see you in February's session. Bye.